everyone, and welcome to the third episode in our mini-series of going from an ELT teacher to an ELT writer. In our last episode, we heard from our expert John Hughes, who spoke to us about getting noticed by a publisher, what to expect when you first start writing, and his top tips and advice for new writers. You can check that episode out on our website eltcpd.com or by searching for ELT CPD on your favourite podcast site. In this episode, we're so excited to be speaking to 3 guest experts, all at different stages of their freelance writing careers. We have Sue Kay, Lindsay Warwick and Ethan Mansur. So I thought we could start by just introducing ourselves. So maybe we could start with you, Ethan.
So I'm primarily a teacher. I've been teaching about 15 years. I work at International House here in Madrid, in Spain, where I live. About a year and a half ago, I started doing some freelance materials writing work.
Nice. And how did you get into that initially? How did you go from the classroom to writing?
It just kind of fell in my lap, to be honest. It was kind of an extension of some professional development I was doing, really. I had been teaching for a long time, and I decided that this is what I wanted to do with my life. And so I decided I actually wanted to be good at it. So I signed up for the Delta, and I finished that, and then immediately signed up for a master's in TESOL and applied linguistics. And by the time I had finished that, I'd been studying for about 4 years. And I wanted to do something productive, I started writing some articles for magazines like English Teaching Professional and Modern English Teacher, and started giving talks at conferences.
Nice.
And basically that led to materials writing about the topic that I was speaking about. I'm very interested in something called mediation. Sort of my articles and my talks basically opened up doors for me to do some materials writing related to that topic.
Nice. So did someone approach you after you spoke at a conference?
Yeah. Basically, they were looking for somebody to help them integrate mediation into a new course book series. And I was somebody who knew about mediation. I didn't know anything about materials writing and had no business working on a course book series, but I did understand mediation, and I was able to work with the editor to kind of think about how to include that into the course book.
Perfect. And apart from the mediation, what other materials have you worked on since then?
I've done a teacher's book. I did the 4th edition for Ready for B2 First. That came out just recently. And I'm actually working on another teacher's book for Macmillan right now. And I'm also working on a book about mediation, of course, for Delta Publishing.
And Lindsay, what about you?
So I started teaching in 1996 in Japan, went to Italy, and then ended up in the UK. And eventually I was at a language school where a lot of, and I was there for a long time. So I went freelance in, I think, early 2017.
Yeah.
And so while I was at that school, a lot of authors that had written books, maybe slightly prior to me getting there, had worked at the school previously. So basically there was quite a big connection between the school where I worked and publishers. Bearing in mind I was based in Cambridge. And so basically that was one route into materials writing for me, because one of my colleagues was writing some materials and couldn't manage them all in the time that she had. So she asked if I could sort of co-write them with her. So obviously that's how I met the publishers, through that. That was one route. Another route, because I also do quite a lot of conferences and teacher training and so on. So I talked to IELTS, and after my talk one year, someone came up to me and said, "You're just the kind of person that we need. Could you review some materials?" And I think that's quite a good way in as well, because publishers always need reviewers of course books. And so that was another route through into materials writing. So I think I started materials writing in about 2009, maybe 2008. Actually, it might even have been earlier than that. I don't know now. It's all become one the last 20 years. So for a long time, I was teaching a full timetable and materials writing at the same time, which is quite stressful and difficult. And then early 2017, I just decided that something had to give.
And what about you, Sue?
I'm obviously the granny of the group, because when I listened to the dates, I started teaching in 1980, and I've been teaching all along up until the first lockdown. More recently, I've only been doing very part-time teaching, sort of voluntary teaching. but I really miss it. I really believe in staying in the classroom if you are a materials writer. Anyhow, I've been writing materials. So I'm a materials writer. I'm based in Oxford, and I've been writing for over 20 years with the same writing partner.
And what are some of the titles that you've worked on?
So the first thing I wrote was the reward resource packs, then Inside Out and New Inside Out. And more recently, we've spent the last more or less 10 years writing 2 editions of an upper secondary course called Focus.
Perfect, excellent. Sorry, Lindsay, I didn't ask you what titles you'd worked on as well.
Yeah, that's okay. So a lot of my titles are exam course books for Pearson, Gold Experience Formula. I've also written general English course books, Pearson, and academic course book for Macmillan, and I reversioned a course book for the Middle East, making it more academic than it was, among other things. I've also written online materials for trainers, teacher development, that kind of thing.
Sue, you said that you think it's really important for materials writers to still stay in the classroom. If we're thinking about a teacher that's transitioning potentially to become a freelancer or a materials writer.
So whilst I was writing resource packs, it was no problem to keep teaching. Where it became a problem was when I was writing Inside Out, and suddenly the balance tipped between being able to write and teach at the same time, obviously working all the hours, weekends, nights. I mean, it was a crazy time because, I couldn't afford to stop teaching. The balance sort of tipped when Inside Out was out in the market and I was expected to go out and promote it.
Okay.
At that point, I couldn't keep everything going.
Definitely.
But I think, the decision is partly a financial one as well, because, I had a full-time job. I needed a full-time job. And I didn't know whether Inside Out was going to be successful or not. So, the balance tipped when it started to sell and I had to be out there marketing it. So then I started teaching part-time.
Okay. And what about you, Lindsay? How did you know when it was time? Because it might have been a different situation if it wasn't sort of a royalty based.
Well, I mean, I think Sue has sort of covered all the bases, really. I think to some degree, it's a financial decision because, like Sue said, a lot of materials that you write are not necessarily going to earn you enough money to sustain yourself for a whole entire year of living. But, when you move on to bigger projects like course books, that obviously brings you in more money, and then perhaps you can then go full-time freelance. Now, it's interesting because obviously now a lot of publishers have moved away from royalties and give a fixed fee. And I think that allows you the opportunity more in a way because you get that money up front. You don't have to wait for it for like 3 or 4 years to come in properly. So I guess that's one benefit of that. But I think it depends on you, really. It was really difficult for me to make the transition because I felt that being in a school, I learned so much. I had that experience of being in the classroom. By the time I left, I wasn't teaching full time because I had a sort of senior position. So I was doing a lot of teacher development, but I was still in the classroom regularly. And I still learned from all my colleagues. I just felt like there were people that I learned from so much there, and that really worried me. Was I going to miss out on that by going freelance? And so it was a really hard decision. But in the end, as Sue mentioned, basically having no life for years and years and years. Having said that, now I'm gone freelance, I still have no life whatsoever. In fact, to some degree, it's worse.
Nobody has a life during this pandemic.
But regardless of that, this pandemic has made no difference to me. I still sit at my laptop all day, every day. That's a different topic anyway, saying no to projects.
Exactly. And Ethan, you're still teaching full-time. So how did you manage to write a course book alongside full-time teaching?
So I had to go part-time in order to do the series that I worked on. I just reduced basically instead of working 20 hours a week, I started working 10 because it would have been impossible otherwise.
And do you think you'd like to go freelance in the future?
It's interesting. I think I feel the same way as Lindsay and Sue, that if I left the classroom completely, I think I would be losing touch with something very important. Just the other day, I'm writing some worksheets for the back of a teacher's book, and I was just talking to one of the teachers at my school about an idea, whether she thought it would work or not. I think those types of conversations, not to mention actually having students to try things with.
Definitely.
I think that's pretty invaluable. So I would very much like to keep teaching, even if it's only a few courses a week. I think it's important for me. I would miss it a lot, I think, if I stopped completely.
Before the pandemic hit, one of the things that I was interested in was online teaching. And obviously that experience has been really helpful through the pandemic. But now I think that if you do go freelance as a writer, online teaching does give you slightly more flexibility than actually working at a school.
Yeah.
We actually moved away from the school where I was working, which made it more difficult to go in and obviously just teach the classes that I was familiar with. But also those students are full time. So looking at full time teaching, I couldn't just go in and teach a class here and there really. But online teaching, I think, provides more flexibility now for materials writers. And it might be slightly different, but I think it's a similar thing. You're still using material in similar ways. It's just you're obviously adapting it to the context, but you can still see what works. You can still see what the students are like, what they are strong at, how they're changing, over the years, because I think learners do change a little.
So how difficult do you think it is to sustain a career as a freelancer?
Personally, I think that, and I'm sure Ethan and Lindsay feel the same, it's getting the balance between taking on enough work and not taking on too much. And then not taking on one job in case a better one comes along. I always think that people are going to come knocking on my door and, offer me the next fantastic, or Vaughan and me, because we are, a writing partnership. I always think we're going to be offered the next thing. We're not going to have to go looking for it. It doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So I think the stress of being a freelancer is knowing where the next job is coming from and not not taking something just for the sake of it. But on the other hand, sometimes you just have to, because, the pandemic has had an effect on work, obviously. But generally speaking, I think it's getting that balance right.
Definitely. And how do you know when to say no? How do you personally know?
Personally, I know what I'm good at and I know what I'm absolutely useless at. And I am not good at writing workbooks.
Okay. So if a workbook came your way, you'd probably...
Probably if a workbook came my way...
Attention publishers, no workbooks for sale.
Listen, but if a workbook came my way when I hadn't had work for a year, I'd probably grab it with both hands, I think you can... What I've learned sort of more recently is that... I thought that the only thing I could write was general adult course books, because that's what my experience was. I've learned that actually, if you take on a new challenge, which the upper secondary course that we've been working on more recently it was a new challenge. It involved quite a lot of exam stuff, which, I had never written a multiple choice exercise.
Really?
And no. So, I think that you can learn, you can hone your craft as a materials writer, even when you're quite experienced, as I would consider myself to be. I still am learning. And at the moment, I am very dependent on Roy Norris's book that he wrote for one of the things that I'm involved with, ELT Teacher to Writer. Roy Norris, a fantastic author of Ready for First Certificate, etc., he wrote How to Write Exam Materials. Honestly, I have over 20 years of experience of writing, and yet that book is on my desk, and I am still learning, and that's great, and of course I am.
Yeah.
But on my desk as well.
Yeah, is it? Good.
It's a great book.
It's one of my favorites, I have to say.
Lindsay, as well as juggling sort of working weekends, working hours, teaching, materials writing, what other things might a freelancer need to juggle alongside these things?
I think the key thing is probably invoicing which I'm terrible at. I always leave for too long. So, you need to factor in these things. I mean, going back to saying no, I am the worst person at saying no to projects, but I think that what you need to do is, I think I suffer from that. There's the planning fallacy, isn't there, where you look at your calendar and you think, oh, I've got time enough to do this and this. And then when it comes to it, you actually need double that time and you can't fit it in at all. Definitely. But I do think that you do need to think about, can you realistically do all of the work in that time, and also think about other things as well. You spend an awful lot of time replying to emails about projects. So, it's not just the writing, but some days, I can spend half an hour replying to an email that I've had, trying to word it so that it makes sense, or, that kind of thing. And then it takes you away from your little writing bubble. And then you have a meeting here and a meeting there to discuss projects. Sometimes projects that don't even happen, but they might happen, or that you're just asked to give you advice, and you might sort of participate because you know the publishers, or they might pay you to do that or whatever. But so there are those things as well. So I think look at realistically what you can do, but also factor in time for things like responding to emails, meetings that you didn't expect, and invoicing. And invoicing can take ages, and also so can doing your annual tax.
And what about networking as well? Would you say there needs to be much time spent on that?
I don't really do that particularly a lot, I don't think. I mean, I obviously no, I wouldn't say I do. I do, social media maybe, but I wouldn't say it's networking. It's just more of a sort of learning network than anything. I don't know what the others do there, if they do anything.
Well, when you said networking, Billy, I immediately thought of conferences, which I'm missing so much. Yes. First I didn't miss anything. I thought, oh, this is nice to have a break from the madness of, promotion and trips and conferences. Now, I obviously, I imagine like a lot of people, but conferences are fantastic places for networking. I'm not great on social media, but I'm lucky enough to belong to organisations that are really good at it. So, I think those are great ways to network as well. But I'm missing the face-to-face.
Definitely.
I like meeting people. I like going to Barcelona and going to the Innovate conference and drinking in the courtyard. And I'm really missing all that.
Ethan, because you're quite sort of in the early stages of your career, have you found networking quite useful?
Yeah, I have. I don't think it's something I do on purpose necessarily. Particularly at conferences, I'm actually pretty shy. But online, I think it's been, LinkedIn has been a great resource for me, I think. And it's not like networking on purpose necessarily, but just kind of being part of the conversation. You see a post and that you like, and you just respond to it saying, I like this post. Or maybe just finding somebody whose work you admire and sending them a quick message saying that, I read your book, I really liked it, it was great. I guess that's definitely networking, but I think social media gives you the opportunity to do that in a less sort of awkward, way, I think.
I think that's really nice, Ethan. And because I'm sort of at the other end of my career from you, I just wanted to say that when we work on our projects, when we work with new writers, and we think, oh my God, these people are really good, we make sure that we talk them up, that we give them advice, we help them in every way we possibly can to sort of make sure that the publishers are aware of them, because they're really good and we want them to, get more. I mean, I'm not saying that we make their careers for them, obviously not. They have to do that for themselves by being good. But because we're sort of more established in the materials writing publishing world, when we have worked with really good new writers, we make sure that we talk about them to people who might be able to, give them more work.
Do you think publishers tend to veer towards the same writers all the time, or do you think they are willing to take on new writers?
That's a good question, Billy. I think generally what we've seen with ELT publishing professionals is that generally, and it's, understandable. People do go for people they've worked with before and who they know might be a safe pair of hands. But I think that it's up to people like me, who knows quite a lot of people in the profession now, to say if we've worked with, if somebody has done a workbook or I don't know, a small element of a bigger course that we're working on, and they've impressed us. I think it's up to us to say, look, why don't you take these guys on for doing a bigger project? And you know, I think that the danger is that people, fall back on people they already know.
I do think that publishers often seem to want to find writers. Like, they do seem to sort of, and often they need them like immediately. So, it cannot always be easy to find people. So you're right. I think they do definitely rely on people that they know and trust. But at the same time, I mean, Billy, you've been writing for a little while now, but you're fairly new to it, I guess, in terms of your career. But and I think you were sort of given an opportunity, weren't you? They realised, oh look, here's someone who we can rely on. And
definitely. That's how it started for me. And I did a LinkedIn poll recently about how people got into materials writing from teaching. And there were 60% of people said they got recommended by someone else, which relates to your point, Sue. And Lindsay, as to what you said, I got the opportunity I was writing a book myself. I was writing sort of a photocopyable teacher's book at the time with a colleague when I was teaching in Cambridge. And I got an opportunity to write a sample for Pearson as a writer had dropped out. So someone put my name forward. And it sort of took off from there, really. I mean, I was still teaching alongside writing, just short things, maybe photocopyables or sort of video lessons and things like that. But eventually it got enough to sustain me when I got my first teacher's book. And also what you said, Lindsay, as well, just reviewing as well, got me into other publishers too. So, I got recommended by somebody. So I think that definitely helps as well. But
I think reviewing is quite a good way to get in. Actually, if you go to a publisher stand at a conference, when we get back to that, or even an online stand and sort of show that you're interested in review materials, if you're good at it and you show a lot of enthusiasm and make really good points on the material, and that's definitely a good way into materials writing.
I'm not sure teachers are particularly aware that exists though, because I don't think that I was prior to writing materials. What about you, Ethan?
No, definitely not. I've never done it. In fact, pretty unfamiliar with what that entails.
But it's actually really interesting. So basically, if you're writing a course book, Ethan, or course materials, they go to teachers around in the sort of various markets that are going to be hopefully using the book, and you would basically look through the lessons and comment on them. Is it useful for your, would your students like it? Is it interesting? Is the material the right level? Do the exercises work? And actually, it's amazing how much the reviewers shape a course book, really. I mean, obviously they're not writing it, but you can change. Sometimes they give really interesting tips and ideas, and they're often incorporated. So you can. It's quite a good thing to do, because I think for you it makes you think about the materials that you use and analyze them, and that's really good for development purposes, but also it gives you the chance to show that you understand materials and have some valid things to contribute as well.
Oh, sounds like interesting work.
So back to what we were saying about conferences being online and things like this. Sometimes freelancing can be quite an isolating career, I think, particularly if you do work maybe on solo projects, don't have many Zoom calls and things like that. What ways do you think that freelancers can feel part of a community?
Things like closed Facebook groups. I mean, I'm thinking about what I know best, which is what I'm involved with. So Publishing Professionals has a closed Facebook group. People can talk to one another. There are other Facebook groups, aren't there? Writers Connected and so on. I think that's quite nice for a community feeling.
Yeah.
I think people are very open with one another. If you have something on your mind, you can post it and loads of people give their opinion or advice. I think that's a really nice thing that's happened. I am lucky personally to work with so many top people, you know, my writing partner, my teacher to writer people, Karen Spiller and Karen White, you know, my publishing professionals group. I think if I look back on my career, when you work with somebody you really enjoy working with, and you spark off one another, and you have the same materials writing values, stick with them, because, you know, it doesn't get better than that, you know, if you find somebody you like working with. So that's how I built up, I suppose, my personal community.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, social media, really, you know, just connect with people, whether it's LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter, that are the teachers, and then you can, you know, communicate on there and chat, and that somehow creates you feel like you have support if you need it, if you have questions or concerns, and then you can help other people, which obviously makes you feel good as well if you've got any tips or whatever. And so I think that's the key thing, really. But I don't know if Sue and Ethan agree, but I do think that if you are somebody who is very sociable and likes to be with people, maybe sitting at home and writing materials for most of your day is not the best thing for you. You know, you'd have to think about that, I think. But I find with meetings and so on, I feel like I get enough, and webinars and that, I feel like I get enough.
Yeah, picking up on your point, Lindsay, I just feel so lucky to have found my writing partner early on. I think I wrote the resource packs on my own, and I did not want to write anything else on my own. I really like the fact that you've always got somebody, because you're right, materials writing is a lonely business. It takes hours and hours of sitting in front of your computer on your own. You know, Vaughan and I have meetings sometimes where we've got nothing to say. It's just, oh God, isn't this a drag, or how are you getting on, or, you know. It's just fantastic having a so I'm speaking up for the writing partner.
I had the same writing partner as well for a long time, and I know what you mean.
Yeah.
But I think well, it depends what you write. But I think a lot of projects, especially courses, you tend to have a writing partner. They tend to want to divide it. Workbooks and so on, less so. But there are often other people writing on the same project that you could liaise with if you're not lucky enough to have a writing partner. I think, you know, somebody writing another level or something like that, you could ask the publishing team to put you in touch with them, just so you can maybe just have a bit of a moan about what's difficult about it, or, you know, or getting some tips. How are you working with this? I think publishers actually really like it if you did that.
And how important do you think CPD is in ELT in general, but particularly as a materials writer? Do you think they should continue to learn and to develop their skills, but maybe to go into different markets?
Absolutely, because, well, I put my money where my mouth is, in that I'm involved in 2 organisations who are all about CPD, really. Teacher to Writer was not my idea, it was Karen Spiller's original idea. There was nothing in the market for teaching the skills of materials writing.
Yeah.
So 8 years ago, we decided to fill that gap in the market. And I think that since then, you know, there's been an awful lot more about how to write at conferences. And I think that's a really important CPD strand. We've got 25 titles now, and you know, still going. So I do think that was an important CPD strand that was missing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think you found a gap in the market. Like, in fact, I don't think you have a lot of competitors still, you know.
No.
It's
right.
interesting because, like, if you look around, there's really nothing else out there. I mean, ELT to writer books are like the place to go if you want to learn how to write a listening activity or something. In my experience, so I did this master's, and part of my master's was about materials development, and we read lots of interesting books sort of about the theory of it and everything like that, but there wasn't anything practical, you know, like, or at least nothing like really getting into the nitty gritty of how do you write a multiple choice activity, you know, whereas the materials, ELT materials writer books, they tell you exactly how to do it for exactly the type of course book you're trying to write. You know, it's super practical. And to anybody out there who hasn't hasn't bought one of the books yet, I recommend them. I think reading too, sort of reading magazines like ELT, English Teaching Professional, or new books that come out. I read a book about 21st century skills recently that I found very interesting and something I didn't know anything about. But yeah, I think that there's lots of great ideas out there for your class, but also for your materials in books and articles and blogs. Yeah, so if you're going to be writing about something like exam preparation, just buy the books that are published on it and read them, or maybe go on some of the blogs or websites dedicated to that topic. Just lots of people out there sharing great ideas in one format or another.
So we've got some listener questions. Some of them are a little bit tricky. So the first one is, how should a freelancer work out their fees, and is it okay to negotiate?
I hate anything to do with fees. In fact, Billy, we've talked about this recently, haven't we, on a project? Fortunately, I think that most of the time publishers will present you with, at least my experience is that they just present me with a fee if it's not royalties. Yeah. And more often than not, I think it's fine. So I'm also not very good at negotiating, but I know that you should negotiate if you really feel that the fee is not, if it's too low for the number of hours that you're going to put into it, then I think you can definitely go back and say, look, I think it's going to take me this number of hours. Therefore I would expect this kind of fee. And, if you explain also about your experience, and the fact that you've done things before and so on, and try and put a case forward, I think that you can definitely negotiate. They might say, no, this is the money we have and that's it. And then you have to make the decision. Am I going to accept or not? Am I going to walk away? And that really comes down to, I guess, how much you need the work, perhaps. And, some writers might argue that you should walk away because otherwise then publishers will start to increase the fees. But obviously, it can be difficult. Sometimes you need that work.
Definitely. I think sometimes it's also hard to tell from a brief, perhaps if it's not detailed enough, or if you can't really work out how long the project is going to take you, it can be quite hard to know from the outset how much you should be getting paid as well.
Absolutely. And I think I've known writers that have actually gone back to publishers in the middle of a project and said, look, this is just taking me much longer. Or sometimes, because obviously when you write for royalties, you're expected to that is your baby in a way. So, you're involved in everything. Yeah. But when you write for a fee, they might say that there are 3 drafts. Mm-hmm. And then suddenly you might find that a publisher's asking you to do a 4th draft. And you're like, well, hang on a minute, I haven't been paid for this. So I think you're entitled to go back and say, I'm really sorry, but this wasn't in the agreement. But of course, you don't want to annoy the publishers either. So it's getting that balance of, you want to be flexible, but you also don't want to be, a doormat. So, I think you can be very polite about it, put your case forward very clearly, and, but also make it aware that you're really happy to discuss it further. And so it's not just this is what I accept, only this, but, that there are discussions to be had.
The next question we have is, how far in advance should a freelancer expect to have their calendar filled, in your opinion?
I start panicking if, last year was a tricky year because like a lot of people, the project that we were hoping to start was pulled. And so we didn't have work for months. We finished a project and then suddenly that made me feel very stressed and nervous. I don't like not knowing what's coming next. So personally, this freelancer likes to be fully booked.
Yeah. And what period of time would you start to worry, you think, if you didn't have something for perhaps 6 months? Or
Yes, that's about that actually. That depends. If you're 20 years ago, I couldn't have survived 6 months without work. Mm-hmm. Now I can, but I start grinding my teeth in my sleep if I haven't got if after 6 months there's nothing on the horizon, I get worried.
Definitely. And what do you think a freelancer can do to deal with the mental side of freelancing? Because I think there is definitely a mental side that people don't talk about, like you said, worrying about work, maybe dwelling on fees, thinking about emails you have to send if you're turning down work, just stress of deadlines and things. What tips would you give to someone sort of looking to deal with just the mental side of it?
That's a really important point, actually. My way is to make sure I get plenty of exercise.
Mm-hmm.
Then I'm too tired to worry.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a bit trite to say that, but talking.
Mm-hmm.
Talking, and this is where having a writing partner comes in handy again, because we were both panicking.
I think for me, teaching can be this way to disconnect. When I'm in class, I'm not thinking about deadlines. I'm not thinking about what I haven't written yet or whatever. You can just focus on giving some constructive feedback to your students and things like that. I think that actually really helps me. That's one thing I really like about teaching, is I just kind of forget about the outside world.
Mm-hmm.
It's very mindful, isn't it? You're in the moment and you're focusing on exactly what you're doing at that time.
And the final question that we had was, I enjoy writing exam items, but I know I need to develop. Where can I learn? And are there any training courses that you'd specifically recommend?
Niall has a materials development course. I'm one of the tutors. So that's a course. So that's the Norwich Institute of Language Education.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, the books that we mentioned earlier that Sue was talking about.
Yes, Teacher to Writer books. Yeah, check those out. That's specifically what they're written for.
And then if you see a job, for example, advertised for, let's say, app creation, and someone doesn't have digital experience with the particular platform, but they would like to get into that, there's sort of a disconnect between not having the experience but wanting to get into it. So how does a new writer do that, or an experienced writer if they want to get into a new area?
I guess in a way it depends on, I mean, you can apply, can't you, and show, how your experience will benefit. And then I guess that's up to the publisher in a way to pair you with somebody perhaps that can help you and provide the support you need. Mm-hmm. And I guess you can ask for that and just, don't let them leave you to it to yourself, but kind of, I mean, you could obviously try and connect with someone online and get some tips there maybe, but I think the good publishers will put you with the right people.
Yes, I would hope that publishers would give some support there if they've got a particular platform.
So let's go on to this quick fire round then. So how would you finish this sentence? So first one for you, Sue. So as a materials writer, my daily routine is?
Sit, stand, sit, stand, sit, stand, eat, sit, stand, walk.
That sounds familiar.
I bought a sit-stand desk, and it's brilliant. Actually, it's really good for your back, and so that's how I spend my day: sit, stand, eat.
And write somewhere in between.
Oh yeah. Oh no. Whilst I'm sitting and standing, the theory is I'm writing.
How many hours do you think you spend writing standing up? I've never tried that.
Oh, I've sort of found that the ideal amount of time is 1 hour in the morning and 1 hour in the afternoon. Otherwise, my back starts hurting. It has the opposite effect than it should have.
Okay, the next one is for Lindsay. So one thing I wish I knew when I first started materials writing, which I know now, is?
I honestly, there's just too much to say, really.
Let's go for three.
The importance of when you get feedback from your editor, reading it, putting it aside and coming back to it fresh the next day when you've let the depression settle. Because often, sorry, this isn't a very quick fire round, is it? But often the feedback focuses on the problems. And so you read it and you just think, oh, but when you've had a good night's sleep, you come the next morning and it's all good.
Perfect. Ethan, one way to widen your ELT network is?
I mean, we've already talked about it, but social media is great. I don't think I'd be on this podcast if it weren't for LinkedIn, probably. So there you go.
Yeah. Lindsay, another one for you. Something people might not consider when going freelance is?
how much time you spend writing emails, as I mentioned before, and attending meetings and things like that.
And do you have a routine? So you might start your day with emails and finish your day with emails, or do you do it in between your writing?
No, I am terrible because I enjoy a distraction when I'm writing. So when an email comes in, I'll not always, but often reply quite quickly, or at least read it.
Yeah.
Think about replying. Yeah.
Sue, one for you. A change I've seen in ELT since I started is...
Oh God, it's the obvious one. Royalties are no longer the norm. I mean, when I started out, they were very much the norm. I won't get into how I feel about that, but also the perhaps devaluation, without sounding too, strong, the devaluation of the author, starting with the renaming them as content providers.
Okay.
I'm not keen on that, although obviously, I've stayed in the profession. I wasn't so cross about it that I left the profession, but I think it's a shame.
Lindsay, one for you. Actually, I'm going to ask all of you this one because I think it's really important. Let's start with you, Lindsay. So one principle I always try to follow in my materials is...
to make them as interesting as possible for learners. Oh, that's so general, sorry. But trying to choose topics that haven't been done a million times before, it's really difficult. But trying to find some slightly different topics.
Perfect. And Sue, how would you finish that?
Oh, I totally agree with Lindsay. It's not general. That is number one priority, actually. The other thing is to make the material and the exercises as well meaningful. Don't get students jumping through hoops and saying stupid things that they will never have to say in their own, in their daily lives.
Definitely, yeah. And Ethan, how would you finish that?
Yeah, I would second that. Just thinking about the material from the perspective of the student. It's great to think about it from the perspective of the teacher as someone who has to sort of deliver it. But I think actually it's more important to think about the students who are receiving it and whether or not they're going to be interested in it, and also whether it's going to work in class. Like it's actually going to work. I think that's something to really think about for sure.
Definitely. And Sue, finally, the last one for you. Actually, we'll go for everyone with this one. A skill or quality a materials writer should have is...
stamina, creativity, thick skin.
Very good.
The ability to meet deadlines. I think that is incredibly important in terms of getting asked back to do more work.
I think good writing skills, just knowing how to write and paying attention to punctuation and all those important things that really matter in publishing,
And what would your number one piece of advice be for teachers looking to get into materials writing?
I think I said earlier, go to a publisher and say that you're interested in getting into materials writing. And is there anything, any reviewing work or anything that they could get involved in? Because I think that, local offices are often wanting to create connections with teachers and get them involved in materials. And I think that is a good way to start.
Yeah, show off what you can do. Make sure, you get it out there. Do it. Make sure you're doing materials writing for your classes and what have you. Show it off and hone your craft, through, for instance, teacher to writer books.
Perfect. Ethan, what about you?
I think that trying to get articles published in teaching magazines, I think that's been really important for me, at least. I just know that a number of the projects I've done, I've been able to send the editor a published article related to the topic, and I think it's made a big difference. It just shows that you have some ideas and you know how to write. And yeah, I think that's been particularly important for me, at least.
Perfect. Well, thank you all so much for coming on and for having a chat. You've all given such great tips and advice, and I'm really looking forward to getting this out there.
Lovely to meet you all.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
You too.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye all.
Bye-bye.
So thanks so much for listening to today's show, the third and final episode in our ELT Teaching to Writing mini-series. We definitely learnt a lot, and we can't wait to hear what tips and advice from our experts you found useful. Do feel free to get in touch with us on Facebook, Instagram or LinkedIn at ELTCPD to let us know your takeaways. And you can also send us an email with your comments or questions to info@eltcpd.com. If you're not already subscribed to our YouTube channel, you can find us by searching for ELTCPD, all one word. Thanks again for listening, and we can't wait to bring you our next episode. Bye!